Hello, hello, my beautiful people, and welcome back to another episode of Woman to Woman with Joanne, the talk show. I am so super excited to introduce to you our next guest, Miss Pamela Junior. She is the director of the two Mississippi museums, and I just can't wait to hear a part of her story and then just kind of talk about the museums and the history of Mississippi that they hold. So y'all help me welcome Miss Pamela Junior.
We shall overcome. Lynchings, over 600 documented in Mississippi. We shall overcome. Emmett, a 14-year-old boy. We shall overcome someday. Medgar Evers, assassinated in his yard in 1963. Cheney, Goodman, Schwerner, 1964. Malcolm, Martin. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe. Philip Lafayette Gibbs and James Green, 1970. James Craig Anderson, Ellis Avenue, Jackson, Mississippi, 2011. Trayvon, Sandra, Tamir, Michael, Eric, Freddie, Janisha, Philando, Botham, Tatiana, Brianna, Rashad, George, I can't breathe. We shall overcome someday.
Welcome, you guys, to another episode of Woman to Woman with Joanne. I want to introduce to you our most beautiful guest for today, Miss Pamela Junior. Pamela, that was beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Thank you.
And thank you for opening up our show with it.
Thank you. I'm a little hoarse, but thank you.
Well, it was beautiful. I could not tell.
Thank you. Thank you.
You have set the tone for this show. And so this is the start of Black History Month. And I wanted to bring you here just to kind of share your love for Mississippi, but your love for our history, for Black history. Mm-hmm. You are the director of the two Mississippi museums. So I wanted you to come and kind of just talk with us about how important it is to, preserve Mississippi history, and then share it so that we know our own history here in Mississippi, especially as it pertains to the Civil Rights Movement. I also want to talk about the Smith-Robertson Museum, which was near and dear to my heart for whatever reason. It's like when I started going there, I just felt this connection. And so I do want to talk about that as well. But I do want to welcome you to the show. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me. This is truly a pleasure.
Awesome. Thank you, Pam. So tell me, first and foremost, in this great state of Mississippi, where were you born and raised?
I'm a Jacksonian.
Jackson, Mississippi.
West Jackson, actually, right off of Lynch Street. I tell people who know about West Jackson, I'm a Canyon girl, okay? I'm a Canyon girl. Yes, I am.
So obviously, because I don't know what Canyon girl means.
That was just a little area within West Jackson from Ellis Avenue to Pecan Boulevard. Okay. That area, they called it the Canyon.
Awesome. So. Well, I do know where that area is.
Yeah, so. Definitely.
Well, Pam, talk to us about your experience here in Mississippi, just growing up and just living here in Mississippi.
Well, you know, one of the stories that is really important to me is during the time that Philip Gibbs and James Green were assassinated, as I call it. Yeah. And I was a young girl, and I remember after it happened, I was going to Blackburn. So my cousins and I, we were walking home, and we walked through the campus, really just being nosy to walk through the campus. And we ran across members of the Black Panthers.
Oh, wow.
And they were all Black, and I can still hear that gentleman saying, "Come here, little sister." And he put this band around my arm. And I felt so much pride. I knew that history was going to always be a part of my life, just to be in front of Black Panthers. I walked home, and from then, I started doing a whole lot of reading. I remember the first book that I read. I went to a library that was right beside Jackson State College at that particular time.
Right.
And I went into the library and I asked the librarian, do you have books by Black people? And the first book she gave me was Black Boy by Richard Wright.
Black Boy.
And here's the kicker. I fell in love with this author because he was talking about a place that I knew, and that was Jackson, Mississippi, when he wrote Black Boy and his travels through Jackson. And I ended up working at Smith Robertson Museum and Culture Center, where Richard Wright went to school.
Yes.
So think about this 360 turn that I made to fall in love with an author and his writings, and then to work where he walked the halls and went to school.
Amazing.
Yes.
Had to be amazing.
Yes. Yes.
That's awesome. So Pam, tell me about your time at Smith Robertson. When I went there, I think what I fell in love with was that exhibit from Africa to Mississippi. So kind of talk to us about that, how it started and you know, transpired.
Yeah, well, the developing of that particular exhibition, I was doing a tour with students, and this young lady raised her hand, and these graphics weren't up, and she asked me, were you a slave? And it kind of took me aback, because I was like, okay, I'm telling this story, but she couldn't gauge visually and to understand that I'm a storyteller and I'm really telling her these children this story. Right. And at that particular moment, after we finished, I went down and talked to staff members, and I said, look, we got to do a better job of teaching this history. Right. And so Kenyatta Stewart was working with us. He's a professor at Jackson State, and he, an amazing graphic artist. And I told him what my vision was. And we needed to tell the story of the kings and queens and all of that. And when Kenyatta finished, it was something to behold. It really was, to the point that CNN said that we were 50 states, 50 spots, the first museum in the state of Mississippi that people should go to. Wow. Yes.
Amazing.
Yes. And that exhibit just travels from Africa into the slave ship, because there's a hull of the ship there. So you go through that after the enslavement of African people, and from there you go to the docks, to the port, where you're put on an auction block.
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Pam. So guys, right now we're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back with more Woman to Woman with Joanne.
Whether buying or selling a home, service counts. Lynette Sutler with One Star Realty is your trusted realty agent with over 10 years of experience and ready to serve you, giving you the star treatment. Call Lynette Sutler today to get the service you deserve.
During a public health crisis, it can be hard for those facing domestic abuse to know what to do. Being confined in the same space as an abuser can increase threats to safety, and leaving an abusive relationship during a crisis can be even more difficult than normal. You can help. Ask them how they want to connect and be creative. Be supportive and believe them. Help them think through how to stay safe. Following these tips, you can help victims of domestic violence stay safe during COVID-19.
Okay, you guys, we're back, and we're still here with the beautiful Miss Pamela Junior. So, Pam, when we left off, we were talking about that the replica of the slave ship, and I do remember coming and doing that exhibit, walking that exhibit, and I tried to put my head in that slave ship, and then I saw y'all had like mannequins, and I was like, oh Lord, I just couldn't even imagine. Talk with us more about that, because the history. So on that wall, Kenyatta's do it,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Did he paint those pictures?
No,
Or
it was all graphically done
Okay.
and sent to a company where they could put it up like wallpaper.
Awesome.
Yes, yes.
That's
But going
amazing.
into the hull of the ship, that was important to me because I needed people to understand, because again, I am a storyteller.
Yes.
So putting them in there and making them understand the rocking back and forth and how many days it took. This was not just a tour that you would be on a ship that you were going somewhere on some type of trip. But this was a 40-day, very bad situation for the African people. No food, the people were getting seasick, people died, they were chained up. You know, I took my bracelets off, and I wear my bracelets in honor of all the enslaved people and the shackles and the chains, because that noise, it keeps me going. I understand there's nothing that I could go through would ever be as bad as what my ancestors went through.
Right.
So that is an encouragement for me to keep moving, keep pushing, and continue that fight in teaching people about the history of the African people and anything that's involved with that.
Right. Yes. And so even from Africa to Mississippi, we saw the whole of the ship. But then you see when the slaves got to Mississippi, they're on the slave blocks. So
That's the auction block. And I would tell the stories about the auction block. And, you know, people. One of the biggest stories that I always like to talk about is our African women when they were enslaved and they were used as wet nurses. And you think about that there was a white baby that this African woman was nursing. And so if we didn't touch, if we couldn't be around each other, there's that milk that was nourishing the nation.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
And so I remember having a conversation with a group of people, and they never thought about it like that. All of her DNA is going into these children, but yet we have to be separated.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Whew, this is something, girl.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Yes,
so
it is.
talk to us about your transition to the two Mississippi museums. I know that had to be exciting to come from the Smith Robertson to now two museums.
Right.
The Mississippi History Museum,
Yes.
if I'm saying it right, and then the
Civil Rights
Museum. So tell us about your transition from Smith Robertson to the two Mississippi museums.
Well, here's the thing. You know, I hadn't filled out an application or done any of these things in a long time. And so I brought all my little young sisters and said, tell me what to do. And so I applied for the job. But again, I had a conversation with God, too, and said, look, is this what I need to do? Is this the move? And the next day he said, yes, apply. I applied. I became the director of the Civil Rights Museum in March of 2017. We opened the museums, both of them in December of 2017, which was a grand affair. And possibly that July, I think it was, I was offered the position of director of both museums.
Awesome.
And, you know, God has a path for all of us. It was a tremendous move for me to be over the greatest and the largest museums in the state of Mississippi. Again, this little girl from Lynch Street, from West Jackson. And that's why I always tell people, there's a path for you. We get off of that path, we go left or right. But when we get straight on that path, the purpose comes into our forefront. Everything that God tells us to do, it's right there in front of us. So you have to be obedient. And I was.
Yes.
I was. And so being at these two Mississippi museums has been a wonderful thing for me. Not only that, but just learning about all the history. Our history is so wonderful. We are ground zero for civil rights. But then in regards to Mississippi history, it's us.
Yes.
Music.
Yes.
You know, writing, everything. Even when you talk about the Civil War.
Yes.
Grant coming into Mississippi, the lost cause, all of that, right? A lot of that happened in Mississippi.
Right.
And then, even the talk of the flag, all of those things happen in Mississippi. We are one of the greatest example of being able to continue going on. We see the differences. We try to work with those differences.
Yes.
I'll tell anybody, come to Mississippi. You got some of the greatest people here and some of the greatest history here that you will either be inspired, you may lose some of your inspiration sometimes, but you know what not to do or you know what to do.
Exactly.
Yes.
And Mississippi is beautiful. There's such beautiful landscape here in Mississippi. It's just, I love Mississippi. My children are always, Mom, why you don't want to move? Because I love Mississippi. It's not because I'm afraid to leave Mississippi. This is home. And I love it. And I'm the hospitality state is what I always, go back to, because it's like, I've heard people say if they go up north, if they go somewhere else, it's like people don't even speak to you.
Right. That's what I hear.
That's what I hear.
Yeah.
But here, it really doesn't matter. People may not wait for a response, but they're like, how are you doing today?
That's right.
Because it's the hospitality state. And I think we genuinely do care about each other.
We got a lot of work to do.
Yes.
And the first way to do the work is to learn the history.
Definitely.
Learn the history, understand the history, and then let's have a conversation with each other. Just recently we got rid of the state flag.
Right.
It is in the 2 Mississippi museums.
Right.
And how wonderful it was for me to carry those flags into the 2 Mississippi museums. Yes. They're there on display for anybody to be able to see. Now's the time for us to go forward and make a new Mississippi, and I'm ready for it.
Yes, me too. Let's do this thing.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, you guys, we're going to take another short break. We'll be right back with more Woman to Woman with Joanne.
Whether buying or selling a home, service counts. The Net Sutler with One Star Realty is your trusted realty agent with over 10 years of experience and ready to serve you, giving you the star treatment. Call a Net Sutler today to get the service you deserve.
During a public health crisis, it can be hard for those facing domestic abuse to know what to do. Being confined in the same space as an abuser can increase threats to safety, and leaving an abusive relationship during a crisis can be even more difficult than normal. You can help. Ask them how they want to connect and be creative. Be supportive and believe them. Help them think through how to stay safe. Following these tips, you can help victims of domestic violence stay safe during COVID-19.
Okay, you guys, we are back with the beautiful Miss Pamela Junior. Okay, Pamela, let's talk a little bit about the Civil Rights Museum and what we can expect to see when we come for a visit.
When you walk into the museum, I tell people it's nothing that I'm going to ask you, how did you enjoy the museum? No, it's a journey. It's an experience.
Yes.
So when you walk in, you're getting context information because you need to understand how this civil rights movement started. Right. So it starts at 1619, even though we know there were Africans in what we call the New World, even before that time. But you go through that, you see the Civil War, you see African men who fought in the Civil War. And then we take you to Reconstruction because we want you to understand that that slavery is over with. Now we need to reconstruct this place called the United States. And you see folks like Hiram Revels and John R. Lynch and Blanche Kelso Bruce. These were some of the first politicians that were here in the United States of America and were representing the state of Mississippi. And from there, we take you to Mount Bayou. You know, as they say, Mount Bayou, Mississippi. And the creation of that, and Isaiah Montgomery and Benjamin Green, which was his cousin. And the story that I used to tell at Smith Robertson about Mount Bayou is that the men would be the ones digging into the ground to build this city. But it was the women that had the guns that were watching out for the wild animals, okay, that came around while they were building this place called Mount Bayou, Mississippi. And from there, because we know that Jim Crow came about, black code laws, and black men weren't able to vote anymore. All these things were happening. And so what you see in Gallery 2 are these lynching monoliths. And you hear the sounds of people saying, girl, don't you walk on that sidewalk, and things of that. But those lynching monoliths are very powerful. People have walked in and found family members on the lynching monoliths, and you hear this wailing sound, and you hear crying, what's going on? And that person has reconnected with a family member just by seeing their name. And then you go into Gallery 3, and that is where you hear this little light of mine, because you need to come in, sit down for a minute, rebalance yourself, because you've gone through some horror in just the first 2 galleries. And from there, you go to Gallery 4, which is called A Closed Society. And who do you see is Medgar Evers with his uniform on. And he's about 16 years old because he was following his brother to the military because he looked up to Charles. And he saw a different world when going to Europe and fighting in World War II. There's this area that you can go in. It's the schoolhouse, and it's separate is not equal. And you walk into the schoolhouse and you see the differences in the schoolhouse. There are benches for the black kids and there are desks for the white kids. Here's the thing about it. When we were open and we could have students in, even though we are open now, but we would have our students coming in, some kind of way, black children would sit on those benches.
Really?
And white children would sit on those desks. It was something. And I would come in and say, we need to change this up a little bit. Let's change it up. But I still don't understand why.
What was in there that would make them...
Exactly. And it's a real good exhibition that really tells the differences and about how children and to hear oral histories of people talking about they majored or they studied the sky because they could look up and see holes in the sky or there were holes in the floor when they were going to school. And of course they didn't go to school but so many months out of the year because they had to pick cotton. From there we see Emmett Till's story, you know, and I always want to say that I hear people say that Emmett Till was this young man. Emmett Till was a 14-year-old boy who was probably hollering out for his mama, who his mother had no idea these things were happening to him. And that story will always be with me because I have sons.
Definitely.
And for them to have done what they did to him. Yeah, that was a catalyst for the civil rights movement. And from there, you come back out into Gallery 3. Again, you need to get yourself together. And from there, you can go into Gallery 5 when there was this thing that said that if we could shake Mississippi, we could shake the world. And that's a trim in the iceberg, that's Gallery 5, where you'll go in there and you'll see our own Hezekiah Watkins, who was a freedom rider at 13 years old. He was thrust into the movement. It wasn't like he said, okay, I'm going, but he was pushed into the Greyhound bus station. And the cop asked him, where are you from? Where were you born? And he was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So if he had said Jackson, they would have made him go back out. But he said he was born in Milwaukee. He was put on the bus and taken to Parchment. 13 years old, not understanding what death row was because that's where he was placed. You're in there with inmates who don't care. They have nothing to live for. And they took his food, they did things to him. 13 years old. And Ross Barnett, after him being there 7 days, and I'm sure he didn't want that on his conscience, all on his record, he dismissed him and got him out of there.
Right.
And so we truly were glad for that because we're able to talk to him. But you see these pictures of freedom riders all on the walls, and you think that these black and white people came to Mississippi trying to make a change to bring about freedom.
Yes.
And from there, Gallery 6, where you hear Fannie say, "I question America."
Fannie Lou.
Oh my goodness, her strength,
Yes.
her tenacity. If only we had that now.
Yes.
Yeah, we got some sisters out there, but it was something. She was something else.
Definitely.
Yeah. And from there, Gallery 7, Black Empowerment, where we talk about the creation of that iconic phrase called Black Power, and knowing who started it, and seeing the marches and wondering, why are these young people marching like this? And from there, you go to the last gallery, Gallery 8, Where Do We Go From Here, which was Martin's last book that he wrote.
Yeah.
We're still asking the same question. Where do we go from here?
Wow.
Yeah.
Pam, you are awesome.
Thank you. Thank
Absolutely awesome. You have just taken us all the way around. This is just wonderful. You're
Yeah.
awesome. Thank you so much for coming and sharing with us today. I wanted to ask, we got just a second.
Yes.
Did they consult with you when they were getting the Civil Rights Museum?
Well, I was on the advisory committee
Okay.
for the Civil Rights Museum.
Okay.
And so, yes, of course, I was able to. And Gallery 8, I helped to create.
Awesome.
And I want people to be able to come. And let me just say, we're open Tuesday through Sunday.
Tuesday through Sunday.
9 to 5, Tuesday through Saturday, and 12 to 5 on Sundays. And we have a new exhibition, I Am a Man. Amazing
Can't wait to come and
photography.
see that.
Photos that are amazing.
Awesome.
Yes.
Awesome. Pam, thank you so much for
Thank you
joining
for
us
having
today.
me.
And y'all remember, what days is it open?
We're open Tuesday through Saturday, 9 to 5, and Sundays, 12 to 5. And we're free in the month of February every
wow.
Saturday, and we're free from now on every Sunday.
Awesome.
Nissan, thank you, Nissan, for sponsoring us for every Saturday in the month of February, free.
Awesome. That is awesome. So y'all have no excuse to not go and see this rich and beautiful history that Mississippi holds. So I want to thank y'all so much for joining us for another episode of Woman to Woman with Joanne. Y'all tell somebody about us. Love y'all so much, and see you next time. Bye-bye. If you would like to be a guest on the show, or if you'd like to sponsor an episode, please reach out to us. You can email us at joanne@womantowomanwithjoanne.com.